All right, and just with all the letters we've been doing, these are ones that we have gotten permission to use in our advice column. Dear, stop it now. I'm really worried about my 10-year-old son with my 8-year-old daughter. They were watching a cartoon together in their 4-year-old sister's room when I walked in. They were naked on the bed together. I yelled at them both and sent them to their rooms. My son seemed embarrassed. Later, my 4-year-old told me her brother asked his sister, the 8-year-old, to kiss and had taken both of their clothes off, and that he let her watch anything on TV so she would leave them alone. Other than catching him once trying to look up porn, there's never been any other problems like this. I really don't know what to do. I'm horrified with this situation. I know someone whose son molested his sister and now he's in lockup. I'm scared to lose my children.
This mom does sound really worried. We know her concern's not at all unusual, and that's actually why Mike and I wanted to share this particular letter. Children's sexual behaviors are always concerning, and it just isn't always so black and white about what the risks are and what the next steps need to be. So let's start with some research. We do know that kids explore sexually, and sometimes this exploration just freaks us adults out. It can be normal, and it's incredibly important to pay attention to children's sexual behaviors even when they may be more normative and developmentally appropriate, so that the risk of harmful, inappropriate behaviors is lowered. Now, the research does show us that 40 to 75% of children will engage in some sort of sexual behavior before reaching 13 years of age. In many of these situations, children are exploring each other's bodies, while also exploring gender roles and behaviors. And their sexual experimentation doesn't indicate that these kids grow up to become adults who abuse anyone. The reality is that sexual behaviors are incredibly common in kids. These behaviors are often a very normal part of childhood development.
Right, and our own Now review has found pretty limited research on sexual experimentation and practice between siblings specifically. Most internet inquiries about sexual behaviors between siblings are about much more mature and serious behaviors, such as oral sex and intercourse. Often older siblings with more mature behavior and with more complex situations. There's very little on prepubescent children practicing and exploring with their close siblings. Part of the issue could be that when we think of sexual behaviors, we immediately think of much more mature behaviors than kissing. So while we do have research on children's sexual development and the very early appearance and ongoing presence of sexualized behaviors, the research on early explorative sexual behaviors between siblings appears limited. This little boy's behaviors are not just limited to kissing either. There are some added factors such as being naked and a previous known viewing of pornography. However, when looking at the second statistic, some research we did find on the prevalence of sexual experiences between siblings may not really adequately account for early explorative sexual behaviors that are still crossing boundaries and inappropriate.
Yeah. You know, and to be really clear, we're not sharing this to normalize this behavior, but to illustrate that it does happen for a variety of reasons, including perhaps a more normal and palatable explanation. Again, even if behaviors that are sexual and cross a line are somewhat normative, research does suggest the greatest risk for children behaving inappropriately with other children is 10 to 12 years old. So this is a critical time in children's sexual development experiences, and it's also critical in how the adults in their life respond and support them to deter harmful behaviors.
Right, so Jen and I recognize that this audience is comprised mostly of folks who are probably working with a lot of parents, and some parents themselves. As professionals, we can better position ourselves to support caregivers and help parents respond to their children's sexual behaviors in healthy ways, with accurate information, and to feel calm and prepared through understanding the myriad of possible emotions they may be feeling. Parents who are bystanders needing to intervene with their own children's behaviors. Recognizing this range of responses helps break down the barriers to action. Finding out that a child is doing something sexual, and possibly doing something sexual to another child, is often completely unnerving. And then add on to that these are brother and sister, well, the reactions here are not surprising. This just isn't a scenario that most people are armed to deal with. Even if people are aware of how to take next steps, caregivers may still feel a sudden knee-jerk reaction in the immediate aftermath of this discovery.
Indeed, and normalizing these reactions helps us move past them to action steps. Sexual abuse thrives when folks are frozen or too upset to do anything. When we're able to share our difficult emotions, we can actually feel unburdened and again, then better able to move into preventive and protective actions. So the reactions that you're seeing now on your screen are certainly some of the more difficult possibilities.
Yeah, and this first one, anger, it really stands out for me. And I think that this mom experienced some of this. When a child breaks a rule, it's really quite common for parents to get a little upset, but here the stakes may feel even higher than normal. The thought that he should just know better. This kind of instant frustration that a caregiver may feel when something is out of their control. And then behind anger, there's always fear. Mom's fear of her son being taken away shows that she may be wondering if he has a problem. Thinking, does this mean that he's a predator? There is so much in the news right now about sexual violence. We're all feeling fear. And this may further impact a parent right now, wondering, is my son going to be one of these men? This might bring a cascade of thoughts about the future and the panic about what this may mean for her son, her daughters, and her whole family. Thoughts like, have I raised an abuser and is he a monster? Might be some of the questions that pop up into our head right now. It's something we often hear when discussing children's sexual behaviors. Parents who are immediately afraid that their child may grow up to be a sexually abusive adult. And that can be an incredibly scary thought.
And this ties into shame. We don't talk about children and sexual behaviors enough. Many parents feel alone, scared, and ashamed, and may be wondering, what does this say about me and the way I've raised my kids? And how could my son have done this? I can't talk to anyone I know about this. It can also be shame about the stigma that comes along with inappropriate sexual behaviors. Words like predator, monster, pedophile, and sex offender may jump into people's minds. Now, of course, there's also worry. This mom is clearly very worried and worrying about whether her son is safe and worrying about whether her daughters are safe or wondering if her son will go to juvenile lockup or if any of her children will be taken away. She's wondering about the possibility of sexual abuse in her children and just plain worry about how all of this will affect her family. And so then that brings us to the guilt. Parents often are wondering, what could I have done different? There's guilt thinking that they may have failed at protecting their kids, and we often hear from parents, what am I doing wrong? Putting the blame on themselves, wondering again what they could have done different, feeling like a bad parent. And then imagine if this parent by chance is a survivor. The guilt and the shame she might feel could be really intense.
Right. And speaking to that same issue, if this parent is a survivor of abuse or even of sibling sexual abuse, which we have seen before in these type of calls, this of course influences a parent's response, worrying that their son will be just like their abuser and that their daughter will have to go through the same things they did when they were abused. Finally, there's the possibility of disgust, even with one's own children. The thought that that's his sister. There might be an immediate revulsion that some people feel when there's the mention of sexual activity between siblings. This can be a taboo topic. And in these swirl of emotions, here's what we hear is what this mom wants to know. Is my son okay? What's going to happen? And really, in a nutshell, is this normal?
Sorry, I'm behind in my little animation.
Sure, that's fine.
There it is. Is this normal?
Yeah, and these are really all scary and important questions, questions that any good parent may ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And finding out more to answer this question of, is this normal, will help mom with the other questions. And this mom is worried, and in fact, she may already be feeling that this isn't normal, hence her panic. Because it really is hard to know sometimes whether something falls within the normal range. In fact, I'm wondering how many of you have ever wondered about a child's specific sexual behaviors with another child, wondering if those behaviors were normal. Or maybe you had someone ask you, do you know if these sexual behaviors that I'm observing in my child are normal? So we want to share a poll now. We're kind of curious to see how familiar this experience is. So hopefully I'll be able to share that. Sorry, folks, hold on one second. Oh, that's not right. Oh, little technical stuff. Thank goodness Lily's here, and hopefully that'll bring us back up to the poll. Great. So I understand y'all should be seeing the poll now. So if you could answer whether you've seen a child's sexual behaviors with another child and wondered whether they were normal, or if anybody's ever talked to you about that. So, oh, folks are answering right along, Micah.
Yeah, it
Oh
looks
my
like most
goodness.
people are answering yes right now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And it looks like we have 70. Wow, it's still going. So overwhelmingly, people have been in this position before. So looks like, give folks just another second or two. 90% of our group has voted.
Great.
And all right, so why don't we go ahead and close it? Although I have a feeling, Lily, I may need you to help me share it when it's time.
Yeah, and what
Good
I'm
share.
seeing right now is that it looks like 85% of you said yes, which, that seems like a lot of people out here might kind of know what this parent might be feeling or
Yeah,
kind of understand some of these questions.
absolutely. So let's go ahead then and move on. So prevention continuum. Go ahead, Micah.
Right, and to help us assess how concerned to be, whether this is normal behavior, we want to look at the situation through a prevention continuum, which Jenny will show you in one sec. Sexual behaviors fall on a spectrum, and part of protecting children is understanding where a child's behaviors fall on this continuum, which is based on the work of Tony Kavanaugh Johnson. And this is also part of understanding sex abuse prevention as a public health policy. This provides us a good way to talk about behaviors and then determine which response actions are best. So what you would be seeing on your screen is that there's a range of behaviors going from green to yellow to red. And that is a pretty easy way to kind of visualize children's sexual behaviors. Green means keep going as you are, still paying attention, while yellow means you gotta slow it on down and become even more observant. Red means that you gotta stop. And to kind of take it a little bit more in depth, just imagine we're looking at green right now. Behaviors and situations considered more green are developmentally or age-appropriate sexual behaviors. Understanding healthy sexual development stages is important, and using that knowledge we can determine whether a child is within their zone of healthy and expected behaviors. Even if they are normal, we don't want to ignore what's going on, but instead use this opportunity to respond and reinforce healthy boundaries. Ideally, we here at Stop It Now would love to work exclusively in the green level. This is primary prevention. Green is the arena where the education primarily takes place. Jenny, we're still
We,
having trouble seeing the slide up here, it looks like.
yes, we're working on
Okay.
that behind the scenes. We're really sorry. We're frozen. We
Sorry,
don't know why.
guys. So usually children's behaviors are considered green when they occur between kids who are close in age, size, and developmental stature, and who are regular playmates. The play is very childlike, and when discovered there might be slight embarrassment but no intense shame. For example, Take the instance of two 9-year-olds in the coat closet giggling. When they're discovered, parents find them with their pants down and looking at each other's penises. And then in the yellow continuum, we're aware of situations and the behaviors that are warning signs. This is where there are signs that someone is at risk to harm another. We may see a child struggling with boundaries, rules, or behaviors, but there may be no evidence that any harm has occurred. At this level, we want to protect and respond. We often seek outside help and involve professionals, and we strengthen safety planning and remain vigilant. A yellow example would be if one of the same 9-year-olds from the green example is now caught playing this game with another same-age friend. Great! This is what I wanted to show you guys. So
So
now it's
sorry.
a little bit easier to visualize what I'm trying to say.
Thanks,
Um,
Micah.
yeah, so if this 9-year-old from the green example is now caught with the same, a different friend, but this is actually the third time it's happened, and he's been redirected each time. Jenny, you want to pick it up from here?
I do. So we want to tell folks about our orange level. We don't talk, we were just been starting talking about orange level here at Stop It Now the last couple of years because we wanted to talk about sexually harmful behaviors between younger children, usually kids who are under 12 and maybe who are close in age and who have demonstrated mature and perhaps aggressive sexual behaviors, but there's been no charges or formal assessments. So this includes instances where we see multiple warning signs and where we see harmful sexual behavior occurring. Outside resources are absolutely necessary. Often there's been a report of abuse to the authorities and strong interventions are needed. So, for example, a 9-year-old closes the bedroom door, takes off her clothes, and puts her 3-year-old sister hand on her vagina. We would consider orange moving into red.
Right, and red behaviors and situations are both causing sexual harm and are abusive. There's evidence, there's a disclosure, and abuse is happening. Red behaviors are always inappropriate, and adults always need to intervene with red behaviors to stop them as they occur and prevent them from happening. Like, for instance, if a 10-year-old holds down a 3-year-old, pulls down her underwear, kisses her on her vagina, and inserts his finger into her. This is serious and harmful, and we seek outside help always. These are not silos of prevention. Almost always, nothing is ever pure green or pure yellow. We often refer to cases as greenish yellow or yellowish orange.
So clearly we want mom to be able to better understand behaviors that are healthy and age appropriate so that she can determine what level of response is needed, basically what prevention continuum assessment to make. Now, we're thinking that this audience is mostly familiar with these behaviors, both healthy and unhealthy, so we mostly just want to emphasize the importance of educating parents and caregivers about these behaviors and characteristics. Informing parents of this range of behaviors is like giving them a blueprint for assessment and then for their response. Now, you'll find some of our tip sheets on age-appropriate behaviors and this chart in healthy versus unhealthy behaviors in the handouts for any of you to share.
Right, and we also really want to help them with some of the nuances of these. For example, shame is really interesting. Too much of it, and that's a problem, while not enough, and that's also concerning. In this letter, Mom notes her son seem embarrassed, normal for his age, right? And appropriate, as he should know that he's breaking a rule. I think it's also really important to emphasize that kids generally do experiment and practice first with other children in their life who they know best. And this is often a close age sibling, even when they are at slightly different developmental stages.
Yeah, and we also want to pay attention to the relationship between the two children. If typically the siblings don't get along and they're often fighting, maybe there's even some bullying, then this behavior of the kissing with clothes off may raise some more questions. Was it forced or coerced?
Right, and our letters are hard sometimes because we don't get a lot of information, but here's what we do know. These children are close in age, and there isn't any previous known history of sexual behaviors between them. Although there was a viewing of pornography, and we don't want to dismiss that. And without more information, we don't want to overreact to that either. Unfortunately, this is not so uncommon amongst this age of children. This may be a prime example of something that is becoming more normal, and yet is still absolutely a warning sign. And the information that our son is embarrassed does also help us know that he's aware, to some degree, of acceptable behaviors.
Now, while of course every child is different and on their own developmental time schedule, we do know that some typical features of 9 to 12-year-olds regarding their sexual development are common. Understanding these further helps us determine whether sexualized behavior is healthy or worrisome. While these primarily grade school-age children are still very curious about their bodies, they are developing more of a sense of modesty and privacy and often feel shy of asking questions of caregivers, especially about sexuality. And sometimes they even like to act as if they know the answers, all of them. Because they're most likely entering puberty during the age range of 9 to 12, their interest and curiosity in anything sexual may rise. What do these changes in my body mean? What do these feelings mean? And how do these changes change me? How do they affect me? As they enter puberty, it's really not at all unusual for kids to become increasingly curious about adult sexual behavior and to practice it. And it's not unusual for children this age to play sex games with other children.
Right, and it's also during this time as their awareness of social rules increase and their own need for privacy increases, sexual play and exploration becomes more, well, secret, more private. As adults, we tend to think that a child who knows that a behavior is socially acceptable should absolutely know better than to engage in that behavior. So when they do, it does seem secretive, and that can add to the alarm. And while we definitely want to pay attention to any behaviors that a child tries to hide, it's also important to remember that this is still a normal process for this age group, to begin to push some boundaries, even around safety and social rules. Think about children at this age who are now more cognizant of sexual terms and slang for body parts. They enjoy saying these terms and words to get reactions and to fit in with their peer group. They may feel older or be in a hurry to be older. And while they may not be comfortable asking the trusted adults in their lives about sexual matters, they are seeking out information. And of course, the internet and other media sources are more than happy to oblige. And there's now the experience of having a crush, of thinking romantically about someone else, imagining the relationship, and even what sex might feel like with that person.
And believe it or not, kids this age are facing decisions about sexual activities and relationships. This isn't even brand new anymore. I remember a 10-year-old boy almost 25 years ago in an after-school program I directed. He was struggling with a decision because a girl at school had written him, telling him that she liked him and wanted to have his baby. The world promotes relationships and sex, and kids are not immune.
Right, and finally, still trying to determine whether this little boy's behaviors in this situation is normal, we know that children's sexual behaviors are different from adult sexual behaviors. They don't always mean the same thing, and children's sexual behaviors need to be put into the context of their environment, developmental age, motivation, and relationships with others. Sometimes we expect a bit more from young school-age kids. We expect them to know what's wrong, but a 10-year-old is still very much a child learning about the world around him, wanting to practice, and to copy what he sees. Yes, there could be a more complex and concerning reason for his behavior, but it's important to start from a place of addressing basic healthy sexual development and supportive tasks.
Absolutely. You know, in some ways, we just live in such a sexualized world now, we forget the exposure kids do have to sex, romance, and relationships. It's good for parents, caregivers, and professionals to remember that even if they think there's been no previous viewing or any talk of sexual activity, kids most likely have been exposed to some type of image that was probably sexualized, or perhaps they've talked with friends about sex and relationships.
Right,
Okay,
and
we're not going to take the poll.
okay, sounds
Yeah,
good.
we're having a little bit of technical difficulty back here with a poll, so what I'd love is if folks could chat in. We'd like you to think now about what prevention continuum this case is on. Would you say that this mom's situation with her son and two daughters is in our green realm, our yellow, our red, maybe orange, or unsure? So just go ahead and chat in some answers, and in a moment we'll go ahead and tell you what Micah and I have assessed this.
See greenish yellow, a yellow, another yellow, an orange, another yellow.
Uh-huh. So, oh, some oranges, right? Yellow. Well, let's show what we were thinking.
So we're treating this situation and these children's behaviors as what some of you said, which is more greenish yellow. We also want to provide mom with the tools to discover more and to have information and choices about her response. We certainly will emphasize the importance of responding, but also try to present a range of steps from understanding normal developmental and exploratory behavior to what to do if there are warning signs of something more serious.
As we've noted, mom is worried. From green to red, children's sexual behaviors can absolutely terrify parents, and that's completely normal. But in and of itself, this boy's behaviors with very little other information is best treated as greenish yellow. In early yellow, we have just enough information to make us pause, to look around, take stock, make adjustments. We want to see what's going on in this little boy's environment, take a look at the other surrounding factors that may be influencing his behavior, and we want to continue the safety plan with all of the children. A lot of times, especially through email, we just don't have all the information that a parent may have, and we won't be able to monitor for ongoing concerns. So we want to give parents the tools, not just for responding to this one incident, but hopefully for them to do some of their own digging and filling in the gaps, as they often will truly have a more complete picture. So we know the best tool for mom in helping her is to really support her to talk with her son, helping her with the questions. Back when we were talking about the typical reactions that parents and caregivers have, one of the reactions we didn't talk about was that of curiosity, wondering what went on, wanting more information. We don't necessarily see this as an emotional response, yet if we start with curiosity, often this can better guide how we proceed and how we even feel. This is the time to be curious. Son, tell me what was going on, please, and what were you doing? Why did you have your clothes off with your sister, and why were you kissing her? We want mom to be able to calmly talk to her children, and while some of these communication skills that you're seeing on the screen may seem kind of basic, nothing can throw an adult off their game more than talking about sex with children. It's easy to assume the worst, but we really need to remain open to anything.
Yeah, mom should know that it's absolutely okay to ask questions and not just ones with simple yes and no answers. Helping parents formulate open-ended questions helps prepare them to ask things like, can you talk to me about how you got this idea to do this with your sister? And we want to remind parents that sometimes children won't always have a quick and clear answer. They may be nervous or still working out what they really think, and that certainly could take a little time. Parents should be patient and ask for clarification if they need it. Listening will also allow us to know what children know. Mom can find out how much her son knows about sexual behaviors, what he thinks happens in sex, what questions he has, and what he may still be confused about.
Oh, absolutely. And when you want to have a serious conversation with a child, it can be easy to forget that it should be a two-way street. Parents should always be reminded that teaching children anything, even about rules, requires them to listen to their children. When children are able to use their voice, there's just more likelihood that they'll better get the limits that are being set, and they'll have more respect for them, and they'll just plain feel heard and valued.
Mom needs to be prepared with accurate information and understand that if she doesn't know the answer to a question, she should say so and then find a resource to provide her the information she needs. If a parent or any adult for that matter, doesn't know how to explain something to children in an age-appropriate way, it's okay to say, "Great question, and I need to get back to you," but then follow up. They won't have forgotten, even if we kind of hope they will. Even if their question seems to be too mature, we still supply an answer with age-appropriate information. We want this mom to also become aware of resources she can turn to for questions about children's sexual health and development. In your handouts, we've also included some of our tip sheets and online help center information, including resource lists on healthy sexuality resources. We know that adults are responsible for keeping kids safe, but sometimes we need to remind children of that the caring adults in their life are responsible for helping them and their environment stay safe. We all work to give the children tools they need to make good decisions, like through these talks, but the bottom line is it's not their job to be their own protector. It certainly may feel like it sometimes when they're with friends or at school, but we always want to be available to them and encourage them to ask questions, even embarrassing ones.
And excuse me, and we absolutely cannot say enough about talking about behaviors as opposed to intent. Separating people from what they do, and that includes children, and not assuming we know their motivations. There really are such a wide possibility of reasons, which we'll look at in a second, and while they may be informative to us, especially when working with children, we want to focus on the behaviors that are not safe, that are not acceptable. We want to help children understand what motivates them, but we also want them to understand that regardless of want or need, it is their behaviors that they are responsible for being in control of. There are many other communication tips for adults wanting to make the most of their chats with kids. We've included a handout on some resources, but I also want to draw your attention to one specific one, especially as we think about effective communications with this little boy. A page on the Advocates for Youth website, a resource that we really like here at Stop It Now, is on talking specifically with boys and looking at the work of William Pollock, who wrote Real Boys. There are some great tips there for communication with boys, such as recognizing boys' socialization away from talking about feelings, so that we don't necessarily overwhelm them with language that's more, feelings oriented, and that we limit overly descriptive and lengthy conversation. So take a look at that article. And, finally, talking, while the cornerstone of prevention, is easy to tell people to do. But when we're talking to children about sex and about their sexual behaviors, the more we understand our own attitudes and feelings towards sexuality, the more prepared and calm and confident we'll feel. So we need to be willing to explore this and ask, what are my values? What is it that I believe and want to teach? What do I want to model, and what am I modeling currently? Maybe adjustments will be needed to bring your values and behaviors in line.
Yeah, and now the funny thing is about kids, when it comes to reasons and explanations, you really can hear anything from them. None of us are mind readers, and since all of us are human, any of us can really be taken by surprise by what a child will disclose. And these explanations range from green all the way down to red. We want mom to calmly talk to her son, but what is she going to hear? What will be her son's explanation about what was going on? When we're talking with kids, we need to be prepared. And understanding the motivator behind the behavior can further help us know where on the prevention continuum we lie. The first three are pretty green: curiosity and exploration, practicing through play and preparedness, and learning. These are all part of healthy sexual development. While lack of information about body and sexuality may still be more of a green level of need, but it really begins to become a warning sign, a call to action to make sure accurate information is provided.
And the influence of the media on a child's behavior is, unfortunately, more and more part of the norm. However, when we know that a child's sexual behaviors are being influenced by the internet, the television, by songs, video games, really anything media generated, then we need to see this as an opportunity and a need, the need for more support and education. When there are other environmental factors, including a child's own differences in cognitive or physical development, or life stressors such as deaths in a family, moving, or other changes, We often respond with more of a sense that we need to strengthen safety plans, perhaps get outside help. We need to pay extra attention. And we're including disability on this list of possible explanations. This may be the one reason a child doesn't speak about, but of course, cognitive and even physical differences can complicate a child's knowledge of what safe behaviors really look like.
Yeah, and mom may find out that there's been exposure to adult content, maybe to pornography. He may be trying to act out what he saw or think that this is what he needs to be prepared to do in a relationship. And finally, there's the unthinkable. Perhaps mom hears that her son has been harmed, that he's been sexually abused, and his behaviors with his sister are now assessed in this context.
Now, we said that we're responding to this particular letter with a greenish-yellowish prevention level assessment and response. And we're not really going to address responses to the reasons here that would move us into more yellow, orange, and red scenarios. But within our response to this mom, we want to make sure she knows that should she hear something concerning, or should she continue to worry about her children's behavior and safety, professionals are around to support her, including physicians, counselors, and other authorities such as child protection or the police.
And no matter where a parent is at on the prevention continuum, healthy sexuality education is key. Almost every discussion about a child's sexual behaviors, in response to every question about how to help a kid stay safe and healthy, requires a focus on healthy sexuality. Often in these types of scenarios presented on our helpline, we're asked, should I start talking to my son about sex now? And the answer is a loud and emphatic yes. And the same is true for her 8-year-old and her 5-year-old too. Now is the time.
So, we know that parents don't always communicate as well as they can to their kids about sex. And sometimes when they do, it's still just not enough. From an empirical standpoint, we know that many parents have difficulty speaking to their children about sexual issues. And that even when parents think they communicate well, their children frequently tell us it's not enough. Poor parent-child communication only hinders the child's ability to understand sexual matters. The good news is that when parents do communicate, well, the results can be really profound. In families where effective communication occurs, research shows children are less likely to experience unwanted intercourse, pregnancy, and sexually transmitted diseases.
We know that this audience knows that when we take the time to talk about children's sexual safety, we're moving into a more preventative role. When we know what's considered normal and healthy, we know then when we should be alarmed. How can we know to be worried if we don't know what the norm looks like and how to keep the norm, well, normal? How do we promote healthy sexuality? Sexual development is a part of growing up. We can't avoid it. And talking about it doesn't make it happen either. Children are exposed to sexual and mature material. Sorry, got tongue-tied. Whether it's a poster of a TV show showing two people in a sexualized embrace, or hearing older kids talking about sexual behaviors, or even hearing a song lyric referencing sex and adult intimacy, children are going to witness sexuality in action. And we've confirmed that it's confusing understanding what's normal or concerning when it comes to children and sex. And sometimes the range is very large, and there may be other considerations. But the more we can first look at children's behaviors through the understanding of what's age appropriate and considered normal, then the better prepared we are to think about what we can do to continue to support healthy sexuality development, or even what supports are needed to help a child who's struggling. And even then, struggling can sometimes be normal too.
Yeah, absolutely. For all of these children, talking about consent, boundaries, respect, and privacy should be incorporated into all sorts of conversations about healthy relationships. Conversations don't have to be exclusively about sexual behaviors when talking about things like consent and boundaries. We talk about these when we're teaching children how to use manners, how to share, helping them to develop their social skills, and as they're getting older, how to help them negotiate conflicts, how to manage feelings, and teach things like impulse control. And of course, if we don't talk about it, there are plenty of places to go. So just real quickly, we were curious if we Googled, how do I learn how to kiss? And there's a lot of stuff out there, and some of it's good, Some of it's kind of goofy, and some of it's just real scary. So we really want to make sure that we're the ones that are providing the accurate information to our kids. So let's do a little bit of talking now about family safety planning. So here are some specific ones we recommend. Mom really does need to hear about the importance of including rules for children, not only about other people touching them, but also about them not touching other people. Sometimes it can be helpful to specify that this includes both children and adults, as a child may not always immediately extrapolate that this also means their best friend and their older sister too.
This also can't just be a one-time conversation. If we can forget our grocery list without reviewing it or writing it down, kids are capable of forgetting these safety rules. It's okay to do what works for the family, too. Some may write it down and post them next to a chore chart or inside a bedroom. Other people may do a formal review of them every week at a family meeting. Some people find it easiest to go over the rules while in the car on the way to a play date or whenever their child is going to be hanging out with someone who's not their primary caregiver, like grandparents, relatives, before soccer games, when they're going on a sleepover, or even when a friend is just coming to play in the front yard.
Yeah, similarly, this also involves using teachable moments. So when a 10-year-old pokes his sister's butt for fun, we review the rules. Jake, our family rules include not touching anyone's private areas. And so that means we don't touch each other's people's butts, not even your sister, and not even if we're just joking around. Okay? And this brings us into talking about consent. And we know that as part of our conversations with kids, it's really important that we talk with children early, not only about other people's behavior towards them, but also about their behavior towards others, including bullying and sexual harassment.
Yeah, we need to talk about what behaviors are not allowed, like our rule about not asking others to touch our own or someone else's private parts, but also discuss what is okay for them to do, like keeping their clothes on whenever they're playing with anyone, a child or adult, and asking before giving a hug or a kiss. And that means we also enforce and respect those limits that a child sets when they say, no thank you, to Uncle Rob's kisses or hugs too. It's important that parents and their children better understand consent. Bottom line is, children can't give permission for any sexual behavior, and what we want children to understand is that they cannot touch anyone else without their permission, and this includes situations where permission is unclear or if permission came through threat or force.
And even if they ask to touch another child's body parts, their private body parts, or to behave in a sexual way with another child, no child can actually give permission. Children, as we know, cannot give consent. So we really want this mom and all of our families to recognize that teaching consent is a strong preventive step. Too often we've heard, I told him not to let anyone touch him, but I never thought to tell him not to touch someone else. On the helpline, this is a critical moment of awareness that we frequently witness. The aha moment and the need for more conversation about consent becomes evident. Micah, we passed a slide. There it is. I'd like to go back and do this before we begin to wrap up, all right?
Sure.
So thanks all for dealing with our technical difficulties, but we want to just go over these prevention tasks before we start to come to a close. Whether we're talking about the 4-year-old, the 8-year-old, or the 10-year-old in this letter, basic prevention includes all of the tasks you see on your screen. We've talked about some already, about communication, healthy sexuality education, family safety planning, family safety plans, but how we use these tools and go about these similar tasks may be a bit different for the differently aged children. The objectives are the same, but again, how we go about it will look different. So for our little boy, our 10-year-old, remember that he's probably going through puberty, trying to begin to figure out what the changes of puberty mean for him. Our education should focus on this, helping him feel more comfortable with the changes in his body and how those changes may affect him. While he may be trying to figure out what it means to be an adult, we want to focus on helping him think about the impact of his own behaviors on others. We want him to find information safely, and while he may feel increasingly shy to ask questions about anything sexual, we want to be sure he understands the safety rules and family values.
And we have to note here how important it is to talk about pornography as a part of safety planning. Wanted and unwanted exposure does happen, unfortunately, a lot more than any parent wants to think about. Yet, children this age do want answers, and as we just said, they can find them both on purpose or by accident. Although younger boys may not purposely go in search of pornography, they do find it, perhaps in response to their innocent investigations into what sex is all about. Children aren't yet equipped to fully understand, process, and sort out what these mature and sexually explicit images and videos mean. Sometimes a child will hear a word or a phrase at school and then look it up, much to a parent's chagrin. What they may see might really confuse them about appropriate boundaries, and certainly sometimes does result in a child exhibiting harmful or abusive behaviors with other kids. We're just starting to learn how the messages adults receive through porn can influence their thoughts and beliefs. So just imagine the impact that this may have on a child.
And of course, mom will need to engage in prevention tasks with the 8-year-old sister. We've been a bit more focused on the little boy, on the 10-year-old brother's behaviors. But of course, we want mom to know that this is an opportunity to strengthen her daughter's own safety plan and environment also. Her daughter's own behaviors could be an early warning sign. She didn't tell mom what was happening, and this is our opportunity to pause just a bit and think about how to help her know when someone has asked her to do something that may be confusing or against the safety rules. Now, of course, perhaps she wasn't confused by this. It's her big brother asking her to do something, as he probably has a million times before. She probably trusts him. Maybe she's also being influenced by talk of sex with her own group of friends in her own peer group. Again, just because she's only 8, this doesn't mean she doesn't pick up on the sexualized content swirling all around her. And developmentally, she also may be starting to recognize that there are sexual taboos and may also start to develop some hesitation in seeking help or asking questions herself if she's confused. So we really need mom to see this as a chance to talk to her own daughter, to help her understand boundaries, and to make sure she too understands the family safety rules.
And finally, for our 4-year-old, let's come to her. There's some prevention tasks at this stage too. It's great that this mom's youngest did come to her with what happened, and this is a great time to talk with her about things like okay and not okay touches, and to emphasize the family rule about no secrets. Prevention tasks are numerous. As we said earlier, they're not isolated to only conversations about sex and sexuality. It's building trust, talking about difficult things as a family, and addressing behaviors that affects others, such as bullying and how girls and women are treated. So I guess now let's jump back forward and just we really want mom to know how important it is to keep engaged, to stay present, and to, of course, follow up on concerns. When we respond to any child's behavior, it's never really a one-time thing. Parenting should be so easy. So this about wraps it up. And with that, we do have a few minutes for questions or comments. We'll scroll back through to see if there are any questions that we missed, but please feel free to chat in some ideas or anything that you may have thought of during our presentation. And again, thank you guys for being patient with some of the snafus there.
Great. Thanks, Micah. So as y'all are thinking about questions that you may want to post, please know that you don't have to put your questions here, too. You're welcome to write our helpline. Although I see a good question that's come up. Should parents be okay with masturbation? And this is really a wonderful question, and I think more and more parents are asking that now. And we do want to confirm that masturbation is a healthy and normal activity of all age groups. In fact, we don't always use the word masturbation when we're talking about much younger groups, younger children. It could be more self-soothing behavior. Masturbation leads us more to a more sexualized imagery. But again, it is normal. It feels good to touch ourselves. And what we want to do with kids is to help them with limits and boundaries about where and when. And we want to notice the frequency. If a child is engaging in any activity in a way that's overtaking other activities, then that's a concern. If a child is in their room doing nothing but even reading, something we want them to do, to the point that they're not engaging with other kids, they're not engaging with the adults, they're not showing interest in their schoolwork, then that becomes a concern, and the same is true of masturbation. But of
Right.
course, if you're ever concerned about a child's physical behaviors, also check in with a physician. We want to make sure that there's nothing else that's contributing to maybe overly frequent masturbation. Thanks for the question.
Yeah.